Alrighty, so hopefully you've already watched the first video. Now we're going to try to simplify some square roots when they have some variables in them. So remember, a variable is just a letter. It represents a quantity that we do not know, so we give it a little letter to represent it. So when we're looking at the square root of 48n, what I recommend you do here is break it into the number and the n, okay? So the square root of 48 times the square root of n is how we're going to start this out. Now the square root of n, that's just a letter, that's not going to simplify, so that's just going to be on our final answer way at the end. But the square root of 48, we want to think of what numbers multiply to get us 48. If we can think of perfect squares that multiply to get us 48, that's perfect. If not, it will work out anyway. So I know that 4 times 12 gets me 48, which is awesome because I know that 4 is a perfect square, right? So the square root of 4 will simplify to a nice number for me. Let's look at 12 here. Can we break 12 down into any other perfect squares? So some of you are going to say, well, 6 times 2, and I'm going to pause there and say 6 and 2. Neither of those are perfect squares. So we want to think of how could we break 12 down so that it is composed of perfect squares. One way to do that is do 4 times 3, because 4, again, is a perfect square. So if I write out again what I have from my little factor tree here, I have the square root of 4 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3 times the square root of n. That's how I'm trying to simplify this radical. Now, what is the square root of 4? It's 2 times, again, the square root of 4, which is 2. The square root of 3 we do not know. The square root of n we also do not know. And 2 times 2 is 4, just combining our like terms here. And 3, square root of 3 and square root of n, we can just combine underneath one square root here to get 4 square root of 3n as our final answer for problem number 3 on our notes page. So our goal here was to simplify the radical. We're trying to write it in the smallest numbers possible, and we have done so by finding perfect squares inside the radical that helped us simplify. So looking at number 4, it's the square root of 80v. If you're not ready to go on to number 4, no worries at all. You're welcome to pause the video and wait till you can catch up on your notes page and mentally before we move on. But number 4 is the square root of 80v. Again, I want to think of square root of 80 times the square root of v because we don't normally combine our numbers and letters. So let's just think of what numbers multiply to get us 80. It's nice if we can think of perfect squares that multiply to get us 80. Like 80 divided by 4 is 20. So I'm going to do 4 times 20. Now it's not always 4 is your number. That's a perfect square. But anytime it's an even number, it's a good idea to try 4. All right, so as we know, 4 is a perfect square and 2 times 2 is 4. So that one is going to be good for us to simplify. Let's look at the number 20. Think of a perfect square inside of 20. So a number times another number. One of those numbers is a perfect square and they equal 20. Hopefully you're thinking what I'm thinking, 4 times 5. Because 4, again, is that other perfect square we're looking for. So if I write out from my factor tree what I've simplified the square root of 80 times the square root of v as, I've written it as square root of 4 times square root of 4 times the square root of 5. And then let's not forget about that little v that we had right over here at the end. I really hope I'm making sense right now. Like I said before, it's hard to tell because you guys aren't here. Taking the square root of 4, we get 2. And again, the square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 5, we cannot simplify. And the square root of v, we also can't simplify any further. So our final step here is to just multiply 2 times 2 to get 4 square root You might be able to guess because we did the same step in number 3. We're going to combine the 5 and the v to just make it underneath one radical. So 4 radical 5v, or 4 the square root of 5v, is our answer for number 4. Hopefully what I'm doing is making sense. If you are struggling, feel free to reach out to me either on email or on our discussion post on Schoology.